Welcome to the first ever Winding Road podcast here at West Liberty University. I'm your host, Jason Kegler, and I serve as the Vice President of External Affairs here on the Hilltop. And today we're excited to have our very first guest, Dr. Zach Loughman, who is a professor of biology and a department chair within the College of Sciences here at West Liberty. Zach is an Ohio Valley native. He is a 2002 West Liberty University graduate, a 2005 Marshall University graduate, a master's in science. Good win over Notre Dame this weekend.
Yes, awesome.
A 2011 PhD of biology at Indiana State University while he completed as a full-time faculty member here at West Liberty. We're very proud of this. He was our first West Virginia Professor of the Year, inducted in 2014, the first of three. He also has been featured in publications such as Neuron Magazine and is also a member of the West Liberty University Alumni Wall of Honor, one of our youngest members. He might not feel young, but that is a fact. He's also been a part of the discovery of several new species of crayfish and is considered a regional expert in the field of crayfish in the Mid-Atlantic region. And then I'm going to ask you to tell us your official title, because I got it wrong.
That's okay. So last year, our biology department grew at such a rate that we actually had to take our department and split it into two departments. And so I'm the chair of the Organismal Biology, Ecology, and Zoo Science department, and I am 99.9% certain we're the only university on planet Earth that has that department. It's very, very specific. So,
well, that's good. That's a niche for a place that doesn't have a gas station.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know.
It's pretty cool. So we're going to start big picture here. We're in the Paul Elbin Library, the largest library in the Ohio Valley, a building that was constructed late 60s, early 70s. Dr. Elbin was a president at West Liberty for a very long tenure, over 3 decades, and was responsible for a lot of the building in terms of capital structures. Basically, created the foundation of moving from a state college to a university. Mm-hmm. Since 1837, West Liberty Academy, West Liberty State College, and as it moved towards West Liberty University, it was traditionally a teaching training college, similar to a lot of the regional schools that we are familiar with today in this region. The regional colleges in West Virginia and Pennsylvania, to be specific. And as time moves forward and as the population decreases in West Virginia and the flagship universities grow, the funding decreases for regional schools, and regional schools need to still keep high-quality teaching training but pivot in order to sustain itself and meet the needs of its region and community. So I'm excited to have you here because I think that everything that you've been involved with as a student and a professor, you've seen that in action, the pivot that West Liberty has made. And so I'm going to just ask you to start chronologically. Tell us about the College of Sciences and its recent evolution.
Yeah, so I started walking back and forth in the hallways in Arnett in 1995. When the summer between my sophomore and junior year, so in high school, before I became a student here. And I met my mentor, Bob Gordon, Mr. Gordon. I have a hard time to this day calling him Bob Gordon. He is Mr. Gordon to me for the rest of my days. But at that point in time, Dr. Sieber was also here, and there were essentially 6 to 10 faculty members, I think. And you would come to Arnett. There really wasn't much research going on. There was tons of academics, but everybody that would go to school at West Liberty was a biology major. We all took the same classes. There was no specificity to it. I became a student in 1997, and because of my troubles with mathematics, I had to go a 5th year. So I was there for a while, but I did my own research project. At that time, Dr. Robert Kreisberg was brought on in 1997, and when I was leaving, he was starting to write grants to do scientific research. But the main focus, which is totally a perfectly awesome focus, was just teaching and instruction. And then in the time between me leaving in 2002 and coming back in 2006, so I was only gone for 4 years. That's when I was getting my master's degree, and then I had a little stint as an environmental educator at the Schrader Center. This explosion had happened with research. There were multiple faculty members doing research at that time. We started to get funding. I was actually brought on from my job at the Schrader Center because Dr. Kreisberg was the chair, and he had seen what I was doing, bringing in grants, and he was like, hey, we're going to start an environmental science major here. Do you want to be part of that? I like what you're doing over there. Come work for us. And of course, when I got the chance, I love Schrader, but this has been my home since I was 15. So if I could come back, I was totally going to. And then I hit the ground running in 2006. I had nothing but support, and it was just basically build something. And that's kind of the way we do things still to this day, is that we talk about it, we think about it, and then we kind of do it. And oftentimes we're applying for grants, we're doing science, we're figuring out how to do things as the money's coming in. I think that that's part of our spirit here at West Liberty, which is we, at least in Arnett Hall, we never got the memo that we weren't a large university. Like, we just have been plugging away ever since the early 2000s. And I came on in 2006. Joe Horzempa, I believe he came on in 2008. And a lot of universities have tension between molecular biology and organismal biology. The university that I got my PhD at, there was so much tension between those two aspects of biology that when they built a new science building, they quite literally found the longest linear distance on campus to get the animal people away from the cell people. And here, we've never been that way. Even with the 2 departments we now have, we are trying to figure out ways to keep the cohesion. But with the research came money, and that's something, like you mentioned, that we are in need of. And we realized that we could take that money and not only do the research, but we could obviously better the lives of our students and the experience that our students get as undergraduates. But we could figure out ways to take that money and kind of put it back into Arnett. And we've been doing that. Arnett is a special place. It was made for teaching. It wasn't necessarily made for research. When it was constructed in 1974, and with the advent of our research efforts, we've done a lot of, we could call it creative engineering, trying to make that building into a center for all of our research efforts. And so now, with the research, we began to be noticed. We started getting students coming in from outside of the Upper Ohio Valley, and then traditional students that would not necessarily come to West Liberty. They would think, I can't do science at West Liberty. Word got out that you can absolutely do science at West Liberty, and that our biology graduates in particular they were very successful. They were getting into medical school, vet school, graduate school. And so I would say beginning around 2010 is when we really kind of started to gel and hit our full, get on the stride to where we are today. And since then, every faculty member that we have brought on has contributed in some way. The amount of research dollars we're bringing in and the amount of research that's going on in that building is just, it's astronomical. I don't think that we call ourselves the Arnettians, the ones that live in there, dwell in there. And I don't think we pat ourselves on the back enough, because we're also very humble, pragmatic people. Like, we are here for our students, and that's why all of this is happening.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
I haven't heard the term Arnettians.
Yes.
I love. And I agree. Like, if I had to pick one word that describes you or your colleagues, it would be humble. But I'm going to go back to a word that I wrote down when you were describing. Nobody told us that we weren't a large university, and that's like something that I feel that exists here, not officially, but it's this autonomy that exists with our size. So would we have been able to accomplish the things that you did within our net? Yes, there would be more funding, but within the bureaucracy of a large school, or at a smaller school, would it have been possible? And the same thing with creating programming, right?
Yeah. I am at the perfect school. The type of science that I do and the grants that I bring in are not necessarily respected at a larger institution. It has nothing to do with the science and has everything to do with this little thing we call overhead. So when you get a grant at research institutions, they have to generate research dollars to support new construction and new efforts and such. So oftentimes when you get a grant, there's 48% of the grant is tacked onto the grant in the form of overhead that then goes into the institution. And here at West Liberty, fortunately, early on in my career, I was able to talk to people about the overhead, and we basically waived it. We eliminated that. And what that did is it gave me a competitive edge, because if I'm applying for a grant and somebody at a larger institution is applying for the grant, I don't have that overhead requirement, and that is taken into consideration when you're giving out the funding. So initially, I was going for every single little grant that I could find. One of the grants that I did the most work on, I think it was $2,500, and I got like 3 pubs out of that particular grant. But it was the thing that was awesome about that is I was able to build my network, and West Liberty allowed me to do that. They didn't look at what I was doing and say, well, that's not good enough, that's not big enough, that's not what we're at. In fact, I was getting pats on the back for the $2,500 grants, just like other individuals were getting pats on the back for $500,000. But by building that network, it got me in a position where over a period of about half a decade to a decade, I was able to kind of work/weasel my way into people's lexicon when it came to doing conservation work. And then right around 2010 is when I started to get the bigger grants, and now most of my grants are averaging around like 6 figures. So we're 6 figures plus. That would never have happened. People wouldn't know who I am if I wasn't at West Liberty. And then the other thing that's great about West Liberty is that in biology, we trust each other to know our field. In a lot of fields, you have infighting, and then more infighting with the infighting in academic departments at universities and institutions, and it's an ego fest. And here at West Liberty, even while I was getting my doctorate, Robert Kreisberg, Dr. Sieber, these guys were like, hey, you're the ecologist, figure it out. And what was cool about that is because I came in here when I was so young, I started working here when I was 27, I think. I wasn't that much older than the students I was teaching. So I kind of knew their perspective. I knew the way they wanted to be taught. And so we were able to adapt our curriculum to experiential learning versus kind of the traditional way of death by PowerPoint. And we've done that here since then. We just brought on a new faculty member, and I can Dr. Zach Graham. He was my postdoc. Now he's an assistant professor. And it's really funny because I've officially had the moment where I realized, okay, we need to change things, because the way we were doing it is now actually antiquated when it wasn't antiquated before. And, I could dig my heels in and be like, well, I built this. I'm not doing that at all. I literally told Graham, tell me what needs to change. So now we're doing these course-based undergraduate research experiences. They're called CURES. And we're going to be rolling out our first one of those, we think, in the fall of next year. And like a lot of institutions are going to this model of teaching because of our freedom and fluidity and humility. We're able to go, okay, we need to change, we need to augment, we need to adapt. I don't know if you have that level of freedom and at the same time respect at a bigger institution. And you mentioned our history of being a teaching academy. We're talking about research, but teaching is absolutely still to this day number one for everybody in our net. Like, we are here to teach first, do research second,
Right.
and so we take teaching very seriously over there.
Right, it's your passion. You're not here for millions of dollars.
Exactly. That is 100% true.
Let's go back to, you said 2010 you started, like, we were ready for blast off. 2009, the university, or this West Liberty State College became a university.
Yes.
With one of the requirements was to offer a graduate program. Our first was in, quite naturally, in it was a master's in education.
Yep.
Since then, in just 13 years, we're over 10. We offer over 10 programs, and a lot of them are within the College of Sciences and,
Yes.
and Health Sciences and Natural Sciences. So specific to programs, like, talk about the new programs that that your team has helped create since then.
There's been several. The first, so we had our first organismal biology major that we had in biology. And I believe at the time it was a track, and then it became a major, is at most large institutions, if you're going to be getting a degree and you want to study animals, evolution, ecology, conservation biology, and you're going to get your degree in biology, there's a track that's called evolution, ecology, and organismal biology. It's always referred to as EEOB. Schools at like Ohio State and Penn State have EEOB majors. And so that was the first one we created for biology specifically. Then that one was very math heavy, physics heavy, chem heavy, and I can speak from personal experience. There's a lot of organismally based individuals like myself whose brain I can amass and organize 100,000 Latin names, tell you everything there is to know about all those animals, like this. If you ask me to multiply a positive and a negative number and then add a positive number, my brain goes to mush. And so there were students that were in that major, and they had they had the ability to succeed. They just didn't have the ability to do math, and I totally understood where they were coming from. And so we didn't necessarily strip out the math, but what we did is we figured out, we were very pragmatic, and we loaded up on statistics and the kind of math that you need as a biologist, and came up with another major called the Environmental Sciences and Stewardship major. And that way we had our kind of, you're going on the graduate school biology major, organismal biology, and you're not necessarily going on to get a PhD, but you might get a master's degree, go work for a government agency, something like that major. And that's where we were until 2015. And in 2015, we brought on Dr. Joe Greathouse. I knew that Joe and I were friends. I knew he was wrapping up his PhD. I knew we needed to hire someone. And so I started academically courting Joe. And basically, long story short, he was like, yeah, I would definitely take a position. So
So you forced him?
I didn't force him. I just kind of put stuff out on the table there for him to see.
Okay.
And he was commuting an hour to his job, and his commute would be 10 minutes. He literally lives on 88 before Ogleby.
Yep.
So we brought on Joe, and Joe wasn't even here a week, and he started talking about the zoo science degree. And basically, we could have this zoo science degree. There's not that many of them in the country. He had worked for Ogleby Good Zoo and had basically put together the curricula to offer to another university, and it fell through. And Dr. Kettler was our chair at the time, and Kettler and I and Joe met, and I was like, this needs to happen. And so we did the whole process, and by the end of 2015, zoo science was accepted. We were going to launch in the fall, and at that time, Joe was so good at his job here that Ogleby came knocking and offered him the director's job of the Good Zoo. And so I will never forget walking into Dr. Kettler's office one day, and I was going to be the ecologist, and Joe was going to be the zoo science guy, and being told, well, Greathouse is going to go back to the zoo. We're going to keep him on part-time. You're just going to be in charge of all those majors. So that was a little bit of a panic moment for me, but I could have either been like, no, my workload's too big, I can't do that, or I could jump right in, and it's that West Liberty way. I was like, okay, I can do this. I've got support. Joe was there to help me. And so we launched Zoo Science in 2016, and that was our like major game changer. We first cohort, I believe, had 24 students in it. And then our largest cohort going into the fall was 2019 before COVID, and we had just over, I believe, 80 students. And to put this in perspective, when I graduated in 2002, I graduated with 12 biology majors. Like, that's how many biology majors we were having. So the growth has been astronomical. I mean, in ecology, we talk about logistic growth and exponential growth, and it has been exponential. So that happened. We can talk about ZooSci, in a minute. But also, when the grad program thing started, Horizontal and I started talking immediately, and the rest of the biology faculty, about like we need a master's degree in biology, because when you're doing research the way we were doing it, I was actually being boxed out of some grants because there was a requirement to have a graduate student. So I was like, yes, let's do this. So Melinda Kreisberg, Horizontal, and I did a lot of the heavy lifting. We filled out the forms, we wrote the proposal, we got it through HEPC, and then our biology master's program started in 2017, and that was just a whole other giant can of worms. And we laugh about this because when we wrote the proposal, it was supposed to be 25 students max. And I think we're sitting at around 60 grad students in biology right now. So we didn't like follow our own flipping guidelines. We've just, there's this constant growth. So.
Yeah. And so you live here in Wheeling with your
Yes.
young family. Your wife is a graduate.
Yeah,
too, right?
we met in botany.
Yeah. So how you have that, and then you have all of this. Like, how do you have time to do this podcast?
Well, you asked me. I get up really early in the morning and I go to bed late.
Coffee.
Coffee.
Okay.
Monsters, things like that. Yeah.
Do we have to take a break, TG, or no? How long do we have? Okay, we'll keep going.
Okay.
We'll keep going. So ZooSci.
Yes.
Okay, just to give people a perspective, when you talk about this dramatic growth, you would have, like, let's say in the 1980s, you would have the College of Sciences being like around 10% of the mix of an enrollment. Right now, you could say we're around 2,500 students. 500 of those are graduate students.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're over 25% and like increasing. The other thing that's interesting, that in terms of gender, we are almost at 70% of our mix of students being female.
Yes.
This year, and I know that females tend to lean more towards the sciences as well. So you would predict that as long as you're still able to take these plunges, like you said, like this is not going to plateau or go backwards, right?
No.
Yeah.
It will. Hopefully, it will plateau. We're working with the administration because we have reached a point where we definitely need more academic support. Mm-hmm. But we brought on Dr. Graham, who is perfect for West Liberty because he's kind of a jack of all trades, master of some, and that's the kind of faculty member we look for. With the zoo science major in particular, we don't know how many ZooSci majors there are because they just kind of pop up and then they're there for a year and then they seem to fizzle or they grow. But we think we're one of 6 where at 4-year institutions they're taking it pretty seriously. We're the only one of the 6 that has an on-campus animal collection. And it's really funny because I serve as the curator of that collection, and then Miss Kinsey Guthrie serves as my assistant curator. And I was asking her, like, how many animals do we have? I think we have around 200. And she was like, no. We're just over 400.
Oh my God.
So we have and most of them are reptiles.
What kinds of animals?
Lots of snakes, lizards, salamanders, frogs.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that's what I am interested in. And USDA requirements are very lax on the reptiles versus the mammals. And they do not poop, defecate, and need to eat anywhere near as much as a reptile does. But so we have the humans that are taking care of the animals that we have to manage, and then we have the animals that we need to manage. So we're currently working on getting another full-time animal keeper to basically be there to instruct the students in the animal care and then assist with the health of the animals. But the fun thing about this major is like we had our sloth that we co-own with Ogilvy Good Zoo, and when we acquired the sloth, she was a baby, and Dr. Greathouse, famously told Dr. Kettler and I, okay, we're going to have to take this thing home every night. And we were like, wait, what? We got to do what? And I became a sloth dad, which was fun. I was doing a sabbatical, and I was writing a crayfish paper, and I had a sloth baby hanging on me sleeping, and I thought, like, this is happening. This is what a zoologist should be doing. So, right now I have a bunch of wood turtles that were confiscated by in New Jersey. They were poached from West Virginia and then given back to the West Virginia DNR, and West Virginia DNR does not know. They're trained to be field biologists. They're not trained in animal husbandry. So we acquired the turtles, and I had to bring them home to my house so that I can, dote on them and make sure they're okay while we're building their house off campus. So it's never a boring day. Every single day is different when you throw into the mix. Not only do I have to work with a bunch of science students, which we're our own special breed of fun, but then you throw into that the animals. It's a very interesting life that I lead.
Yes.
We'll leave it at that.
Indeed. And you're still married.
Yes, I am still married.
Okay.
Yes, I have an extremely tolerant, wonderful wife.
The sloth's name is Sweet Pea.
Yes, Sweet Pea.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She's so cute. And the students, over 400 animals here, but they also are at Ogilvy.
Yeah, we have our partner zoo, of
Yeah.
course, with Dr. Greathouse, is Ogilvy Good Zoo.
Right.
And our students they have to do internships with ZooSci, and they're guaranteed an internship there. And then every one of the students has the opportunity while they're here to basically get hours outside of their internship and assist the keeping staff and the education staff with whatever's going on at the zoo. So it's a very good relationship that we have with them. So basically, by us having the reptiles, which they don't have a lot of, and the zoo having the mammals and the birds, which we don't have a lot of, if a student comes here, they get the full gamut of what they would need to learn to be an effective zoo professional.
Do you have any examples that you could share of professionals now that are graduates?
Oh, yeah. We have Colleen Hazelton. She was at an aquarium in the Florida Panhandle. Now she's at the New Orleans Aquarium, the Audubon Aquarium, which is Nazier Aquarium. Like, her job is to go diving in the giant tank and make sure her animals are good to go, like every other day. And when she came here, she's from Central West Virginia. I distinctly remember her saying, "I want to work with stingrays one day." And I was like, "Well, we will do everything we can to make that happen, but as long as you work here, we'll be able to vouch for you." And she worked her butt off, and now she's literally doing what she wants to do. One of my former students bumped into me Labor Day weekend, and he's on what we call the internship circuit. A lot of times, if you want to work with animals, you graduate with your 4-year degree, and then you do a series of internships, just getting as much experience as possible, building your network, and then that leads to your job. And what many people don't realize is those internships can be incredibly competitive. And Chris Lloyd's his name. He got an internship at this facility called Fossil Rim, which is in Texas. I believe, yes, it's Texas. Might be Florida, but I think it's Texas. He's working with rhinoceroses and large mammals that everybody wants to work with that says they want to work in a zoo. Then he went on and did an internship with the Department of Natural Resources, Minnesota, I think, or Maine, one of the northern states, chasing loons. Because birds were his main, focus. And now he's heading on to another gig, which was pretty awesome in Alaska. So, and he's a West Virginia student too. So, we weren't able to provide the students the education necessarily to get that for them. And now all the students that work hard are landing these jobs. Allie Joy is another one. She was the voice of What's Up West Lib when she was here. And she told me when I met her before she even came here, I went to zoo school in Columbus, Ohio, at the Columbus Zoo. That's where I met Allie. And she told me that she wanted to work with seals and be a sea lion trainer. That is like one of the most insanely competitive jobs you can get in the zoo because everybody wants to do it. Now she's the sea lion trainer at the Niagara Aquarium. So like the students that come here and they put in the time, we help them achieve what they want to with their life.
So in like Colleen's case, maybe it's not true for her, but you have West Virginia students, a lot of which are either first generation, qualify for full federal aid, Promise Scholars, have jobs.
Yes,
outside.
Absolutely have jobs.
Outside, they're taking care of their families. It's not what you think of a traditional undergraduate student profile. And then, yes, you give them credit for working hard, but it's also our faculty that embrace them, that develop relationships that don't exist at. There is no way, no disrespect, but there's no way that the person at your level at Ohio State has a sloth hanging around its neck at home.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, probably.
And there's probably a pretty big difference in terms of like the relationships that bigger schools faculty have with their students, and I think that, don't you feel like that's probably one of the biggest factors? It is.
When I went to school here as an undergrad, I was part of a family. Like I was failing physics miserably, but I was trying as hard as I could to get past it. And I remember physics was taught in the basement of Main Hall, and I just taken the second exam first semester, and I knew that I bombed it. And I was like walking across the quad, and Mr. DeWitt, who doesn't work here anymore, saw me, and he was like, "How'd the physics test go?" I was like, "It didn't go well." He goes, "Well, you'll get them next time, And then I made it into the main hall of Arnett, and Mr. Gordon was in the hallway, and he came up and he was like, "Well, how'd you do?" And I was like, it didn't do well. That did not go the way it should have. And he goes, "Well, we'll get you another tutor, lift yourself up, have your day, but we're going to get at it." And like that familial, we got your back, you're not alone. When you're not doing well, I feel like that's our secret. Like when you have a student that excels, they're going to excel anywhere, but it's the students that need that extra pat on the back, and that was me. Like a lot of my students think like I got a 4.0. I graduated with a 2.9 in undergrad. Then I went to grad school, had nothing but animal classes, and got a 4.0 for the rest of my career. But that resonated with me. So now I'm a professor here, and when I see the students struggling and everything, we're going to get through this. Like that's the attitude that I have. I figured out that with this current generation, they're extremely visual. So I changed my lectures, and then before every test in undergrad, we have these review sessions. And I literally tell Kathy, it's my wife, like, I don't know when I'm going to be home tonight. I gave a review session last spring for ecology that was 3.5 hours long. I thought it was going to be half an hour. But, we're in it to win it for the kids. Like, that's why we're here. And they know that. When they know that, those walls go down a little bit, and where there might be a little bit of fear, there's more understanding, so they're willing to come get the help. And that's another secret, I think, to our success with our students.
Totally agree. I think one of the reasons why you and I might get along so well is because we're like the same exact person.
Yeah.
And I had the same experience. My undergrad, it was 5 hours away. And I remember regretting my decision because at the time, a few years older than you, that West Liberty I never really considered it because of its the myth of like high school on the hill, which I have come to realize is like opposite of the truth. But the reason I struggled in undergrad was because I didn't have that relationship with the faculty. I mean, I think it's simple as that. And so it's no wonder why our graduates are so successful coming from minimal resources.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good spot to end at in terms of taking a break. If we would like for this break to be sponsored.
Yeah. Okay.
And so if you're listening or watching, and if you're interested in sponsoring the Winding Road podcast, give us a call. You'll find us everywhere on social media or on our website. And so we'll take a break now. We'll come back and we'll dive into some things that are either happening right now or on the horizon that are really exciting.
Sure.
With Dr. Zach Loughman.
Want a career working with animals? Check out the Zoo Science and Applied Conservation program at West Liberty University. With over 300 animals on campus, dedicated lab spaces, fieldwork and internships, and a partnership with the AZA-accredited Oglebay Good Zoo, you'll get hands-on experience with reptiles, amphibians, and mammals. Our unique program has everything you need to start an exciting career as a zookeeper, researcher, or conservation scientist. Find out more at westliberty.edu/zoosci.
So welcome back to the Winding Road podcast. We're here with Dr. Zachary Loughman, and enjoyed our first half, and want to dive a little deeper into what's the exciting things that are happening in your world. So if you are paying attention to West Liberty on the surface, you might hear what's going on? I heard West Liberty's building a hotel. Or I didn't know we had a swim team. We're building a pool. And so talk to us about what's going on, that we're not building a hotel or a pool. What are we building?
We are building a facility that's going to be called the Appalachian Aquatic Conservation Center. And the location for this center is it has so many names. I just know it as the Roadworthy or West Liberty Special Events Building, but it's basically the large log cabin-esque restaurant that is across 88 from campus. And so in 2019, I was in a lot of meetings because 2 crayfish had just gotten federally listed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And when you put an animal on the endangered species list, you have, the goal is not for it to stay there in perpetuity. The goal is to get it off. In fact, one of the kind of de facto rules of the Endangered Species Act is animals that can't be delisted oftentimes won't be listed in the first place. So when I was helping with that process, I kept saying we can propagate the crayfish, which means grow them, produce them, and then we can release them back into the wild once we clean up the streams where they live. And there's plenty of hatcheries and aquaculture facilities across the country. Many of them are actually funded by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. But I assumed that they would want to grow these things at those hatcheries. And it turns out that they do want to grow them at the hatcheries, but they need somebody to do the science to figure out how to grow them first. They don't want to necessarily do that piece. And so I was in a meeting, and in the meeting, this is before COVID when we used to actually go to meetings, so this was in Elkins, I said, well, why can't we just grow these things at White Sulphur? There's a hatchery in White Sulphur Springs. And then somebody said, well, we can't right now. You should have a building. And then that started this these tendrils going through all the different conservation agencies of maybe we should figure out a way to help Zach have a building. He's the guy that's going to be doing the work to figure out how to do this. It makes a lot more sense for the building to be on his campus than for it to be 5.5 hours away. So I found out about this particular grant through the Department of Environmental Protection, West Virginia has. It's funded through abandoned mine lands money at the federal level, and it's basically a grant where you can request monies to build on land that had previously had mining associated with it. And the building that occur there have to either help the community or help West Virginia as a whole. And so the proposal I wrote was for this building, and the point of the building was when you have an endangered species, we got to get it off the list. We got to figure out how to propagate them. That's one aspect of this. But another aspect is if you're in southern West Virginia in the town of Oceana, this is a real world example, which is on a stream called Clear Fork, and you want to put in a water line, because there's an endangered crayfish there, you have to actually pay more money because you can't just put front end loaders and trucks and everything in the river. You've got to get in there. You got to grab the crayfish. You got to get them out of the out of the river. You got to do your construction, and then get out of there in a time frame where the crayfish won't reinvade. And so that presented another problem or issue. What are we going to do when these small communities want to do construction? And I am the Lorax for these crayfish. I speak for the crayfish. That's what I've dedicated my life to. And I was
crayfish advocate.
Yes, I am a crayfish advocate. And I was like, well, I understand why the community would be frustrated, and I certainly don't want the communities to have disdain and hate for the crayfish. So why don't we, in association with this building, add labs that can house crayfish during these efforts, and then we will charge those small southern West Virginia communities next to nothing to house the crayfish, and use our students to go down and do the work that consulting companies would traditionally do. And and so that was part of it. So
that's like the hotel.
Yeah, that's where the hotel comes from that everybody keeps hearing about. It's kind of like a crayfish hotel. So the point of the building then is to facilitate research to propagate these animals so we can grow them and release them, and then to also serve as potential holding facility for endangered crayfishes so that we can move on and have economic development in that part of the world. And we have a pilot study that's already happening where we're working in the town of Big Sandy, which is just outside of Welch. And they're trying to put in a new bridge, and we're working with the Department of Transportation. And DOT has now funded us, and we've done it 3 or 4 times now, where we go in and we clear out the local crayfish. We bring them all the way back here to West Liberty. They live in a smaller version of what will ultimately be the building in my lab in Arnett. And then they do, developers do what they have to do, get out of the river, and then we return the crayfish, and it's worked out, extremely well. So we have proof of concept of our idea. While I was writing the grant, the DEP said, well, could you do other animals beyond crayfish? What do you mean? Could you potentially house freshwater mussels, various species of non-game fish, potential aquatic plants, and turtles? It's like, yeah, we can do that, because that's what I do. I think about things, and I'm like, yes, we can do that. And then we'll figure it out as we're going. And so there will be other animals housed, and that's why it's not the Crayfish Conservation Center, but the Appalachian Aquatic Conservation Center, because we're catering to the Central Appalachian region. And another university has a facility similar to this. Virginia Tech has a mussel rearing facility, but I know that we are going to be the only facility at a higher education institution in the Mid-Atlantic region or Northeast that has anything like this. And so we've run into some issues. I wrote the proposal in 2019. So the budget was based off of 2019, and we've kind of had this little thing called inflation go down. We've had a pandemic. We've had all these events globally that have caused building expenses to increase. So I think it was around this time last year, we weren't tweaking, but we were kind of like, what are we going to do? Because the grant was for a chunk of change. It's for $1.5 million. But $1.5 million in 2021 is not the same as 2019. And then the suggestion was made, well, why don't we incorporate the special events building? Because the other thing that we were building in this structure was classrooms, because we always need places to teach. And so what we're doing now is we're taking this building that the university was trying to figure out a purpose for and giving it a solid purpose. And then in the large parking lot that you drive through to get to it, that's where there's going to be the new construction. And so basically we're going to have the 3 labs which will be constructed. And that's looking to be a 120 by 40 foot single story facility. And then the special events roadworthy, whatever you want to call it, is being updated and is going to turn into a teaching space for primarily science.
What do the labs look like?
Well, this actually is great, the way that this is shaken out, because we would be in these meetings here on campus, and I need a very utilitarian look. Like, if you go to zoos or aquaculture facilities that are similar to what we what I intended on constructing. They're not showy. They're like block, solid cement floors. Everything can be hosed down. They're very pragmatic. And when we were trying to have pragmatic with up-to-date modern, higher ed, it wasn't jiving. So we're now able to have our cake and eat it too, because the labs themselves are going to be somewhat simple in their construction. Basically, it's going to be a block building with we think, slanted roof, may not be a slanted roof. And it's all about keeping the animals comfortable. So like these rooms are going to be held at about 40 degrees Fahrenheit in the wintertime, because we need the animals to cool down because it's wintertime. And basically, it's just going to be 30 by 30 foot, lots of gorilla racks with 40-gallon aquaria, big what we call aquaculture troughs, and it's going to be set up to hold as many animals as we can without impacting welfare and well-being, to do the science and to do the holding so that the communities can do what they need to do. And then special events is going to be completely remodeled into a teaching space, an up-to-date modern teaching space, which is wonderful because all of us Arnettians would love to have a truly modern place to teach. We've updated a couple rooms, but it's like walking through time as you teach in Arnett. Some of the rooms look like they were built in 1974, and others look like they were built in 2021.
Right.
So
this is what you probably always wished for.
Yes.
For Arnett, and so now it's coming.
Yes.
And the space is beautiful. I mean, it's hard to describe like how this came to be, but this is a restaurant.
Yeah.
It was built as a restaurant, and so you're utilizing the restaurant building and then the parking lot.
Yes.
And it's right across the 88,
Yep.
right across the winding road, and you will have undergraduate students like in this, again, like you said, experiential, immersive environment.
Well, it presented an opportunity because we had all of these students coming into ZooSci, like Allie and Colleen are great examples. They came in and they wanted to do work in aquariums, and we got the building. We realized what we would be able to offer at the building, and we have a handful of faculty members in biology that have experience doing marine biology. So we put together a track that will be housed underneath Zoo Science, which is marine biology and aquarium sciences. And so students that want to work in aquariums, do a career that's based in marine biology, here we are in landlocked West Virginia, and we've figured out a way to make that happen. So that track actually started before the building was constructed. This fall is the first fall for students to enter that.
Okay. And then what's your approximate timeline of when the building will be open?
It changes weekly, because since this is a grant, it's not like there are so many steps in this process. There's a very large amount of bureaucracy, which is fine.
It's surprising.
It's federal surprising. It's federal dollars, so they want to make sure all of the money is being spent accordingly. So we have been working with our architects, and we just got our rendering last week. So we're hoping to get all the final bits of paperwork that we need to release the funds for construction. We're already drawing down on the part of the grant that is used for planning and all that consultation for environmental consultants and things like that for the site. But we think it will definitely be constructed either this time next year, which would be the fall of 2022, or early winter 2023.
Okay.
That's because the main building the building that's being constructed is pretty straightforward. It's not an overly complicated building to construct, and then we're renovating the already existing space. So this works out much better. If we were at our original site, which was down by the soccer field, the construction of that that was going to be a massive endeavor. This is not going to be as big it's still big, don't get me wrong, but it's not taking a grassy field and turning it into a building. We already have a pre-existing building.
So this is another hat you're wearing.
Yes.
This is a pretty big helping to manage a construction project. And so you mentioned that most of it is funded through a grant. could you use some more support if
Oh,
people are listening?
we can always use support. There's never
private funding, corporate
Yes.
sponsorship is all on the table.
That is all on the table. We will name a lab after you. But no, the good news is, and granted, with the state of our economy, Lord knows if this statement will be true, but we've met with the company that's building it, and they've basically said, if the economy heads in the current trajectory, we are going to be okay. That being said, we don't know what the hell is going to happen 1 month to the next, so I just hope that holds true. But once the building's constructed, the beauty of the lab spaces is they are able to change into whatever we need them to be, and as the science changes, we'll need funds to augment those. But the cool thing is, word's gotten out in my world that we have the building, and like I've already received one $100,000 plus grant to begin doing work in the building that's not constructed yet. So we have a partner we're working with, White Sulphur Springs National Fish Hatchery. So we're basically starting the projects at the hatchery, and we're sending our students down there, and they're working. And then like the building's being constructed, it's a 5-year grant. So whenever the building's constructed, we'll then move in, like the second half of the grant will be based out of there.
So you mentioned sending your students down to White Sulphur Springs.
Mm-hmm.
Can you like shed some light on like how unique it is that our undergraduate students have experiences like this?
Oh, it's very unique. I don't feel like I sleep. I just feel like I work and grind at this all the time. But Great House, Kettler and I, when we were doing the curriculum, we said for zoo science in particular, there has to be not one but 2 internships. So that meant that we had to build relationships with as many conservation-based organizations as possible. And I was starting to make a spreadsheet, and you do things and you kind of keep track of things in your mind, and you think like, okay, I think we have like 10-ish institutions. And last time I looked at this spreadsheet, we're up to like 24 different zoos, fish and wildlife facilities, nature centers, animal rehab places, all across the country. And our students go there, they kick butt. Everywhere we go, we have a solid reputation. I have yet to have someone say, I don't want a West Liberty student. In fact, it's always the opposite. It's like, send us more, which is pretty awesome. But now, we've got, I believe we had students in Oregon, Baltimore, Texas, Costa Rica, Florida, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Washington, D.C., all over Ohio, doing this internship thing this summer. And I had a student come up to me on Friday, and she was like, hey, I think I want to do my internship in Wales. And I was like, okay. She's like, well, this was the individual that was in Costa Rica. She was like, I like the international aspect. Will you help me? And that's not locked down yet, but I'm pretty certain that we will go after that with everything we have. So
that's amazing.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to forget about the crawfish.
Yes.
When I introduced you, I said that West Liberty, under your leadership, has discovered several species of crawfish. Can you fill in the blank there?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what are we talking about?
So the fun thing about studying crayfish is that nobody really studied them. And when you study animals, if you study the groups of animals that people like most mammals, birds, like snakes, believe it or not, there's lots of people. I know you're not one of them. Yeah. But
that's why I'm not an Arnettian.
But snakes, there's a big chunk of professionals that have dedicated their lives to studying those animals. Crayfish really had one champion from 1940 to 1994, and then a handful, and I literally mean like 4 or 5 people that studied them intensively. So when I was in grad school, making the jump to crayfish was a pretty lucrative decision. I didn't know it at the time because there's just so much to do. And one of the things that's kind of nice is that there's all these taxa that don't have names. So I've worked with a handful of people that are my collaborators, and we collectively have discovered probably 50 or 60 species that need names. There's one project I'm working with This woman, Dr. Bronwyn Williams at the North Carolina State Museum, and then another guy, Dr. Dave Lieb at Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission. And we sampled this animal. It was thought to be one species that lives from Philadelphia to the Georgia-South Carolina border. The West Liberty kids, we were in literally, last time I counted, I think it was close to 400 streams between Philadelphia and the Georgia border, up to the Appalachian Mountains. That's what we call the Piedmont and the coastal plain. And we ran genetics, and the genetics for that one project was taking one species and splitting it up into 28. So, like, finding new species is not hard when it comes to crayfish if you know how to do it. What's hard is carving out the time to then go through the process of writing the paper to describe it. And so I've been a part of 15 of those so far. I right now have 2 grad students that have worked on species descriptions. One of them, Emmy, we have her thesis done. We just need to get the paper out. But she's definitely worked up one that will almost certainly be accepted as one. And then another student I have, Alyssa Opiasano, who came from Virginia. She's working on this for her thesis. And it's really funny because when she came in, we were like, all right, we're going to name this one. It's going to be easy. It's in coastal Virginia. This is going to be straightforward. And then we added one more gene to our analysis, and now that one taxa could potentially be 4. So now we have to figure out, like, what are we going to do with Alyssa's thesis? Because she could be here for 10 years, but she needs to be here for 2. So we think we have a plan in place. But that's the fun part of doing this. That's my church. I tell everybody, like, my favorite part of my job is when I am in a van, one of our 15-passenger vans, bouncing down some dirt road in the middle of nowhere with, like, 4 or 5 grad students, undergrads. Like, that is when all the stars line up and I am at peace because we're focusing, we're doing what we do. I'm out in nature, and I got the kids, right there with me. So.
And we have one that's named after you.
Yes.
One, the Hatfields and McCoys.
We have Canberra's Hatfield-eye. I named that one. And when you name species, you can do quirky things, and I'm about as quirky as they get. So that animal lives in the Tug Valley where the Hatfield-McCoy feud happened. And there's a stream there called Mate Creek, which is where the Hatfields had their lumber camp. So when you describe a species, you find a type locality, which will, like, represent the species for all of time. So I took my son and my wife down with me, and we went to Mate Creek where the Hatfields had their camp, and that's actually the stream that represents Canberra's Hatfield-eye. So, and Hatfield-eye lives in Kentucky, and I'm from West Virginia, so forever there will be a Hatfield-eye living in Kentucky.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And don't forget, it was our president of our foundation that had the idea to move the aquatic center.
Yeah, and that was.
I think you promised her you'd name one after her.
Yeah, Angie may very well. There might be Angie I or Angie A, I guess is what it would be.
Okay, so I'm conscious of time. We could talk forever, but I'm going to ask you one broad higher ed question. But
Sure.
Is there anything that we've missed that you want to?
I think we're good.
Okay. All right. So the field I'm studying right now at WVU is higher education, and I'm diving into the future of higher education and how higher ed is just like you described, the supply chain and inflation and everything. Higher ed is being affected at the same rate and significance, and it is a very slow to move and change industry. And so it's at the crossroads, in my opinion. One stat that I can't get out of my head is that if you combine all students in the country from a West Virginia Northern to a Harvard to a University of Phoenix, only 18% of students live on campus right now. And so that number is, again, like only going to trend downward. And so we are at within a slow system in West Virginia, a poorly funded state system. But thanks to people like you, we aren't just left with our hands up in the air. Like, what are we supposed to do right now? We've kind of already started in living and working in the world that we probably need to be in, which is in this like capitalize on our uniqueness phase. So, as an academic, like, where do you see the future of higher education? Do you see it changing? Think about like the time that you retire, which I'm not sure will ever happen. But like, what's it gonna look like?
I really don't know. COVID did a lot of good and bad. One of the things that COVID did is it took classroom, like people like me that would like grab onto their whiteboard with their nails and would run away from Zoom screaming. And it forced us to learn how to live in this digital world. And now, I had a thesis meeting last week with one of my off-site graduate students. He was in California, and we were meeting with 2 researchers in Australia. And it was just like, yep, that's my 2:00 meeting. And 5 years ago, if you would have told me, I would have been a nervous wreck the entire week to make that happen. And now it just is what it is. So the world is becoming smaller in some regards, but at the same time, the people that control our budgets, I don't know if they understand what we are. I don't know if they understand our world. I certainly don't know if they understand what a day in the life of a professor that's doing their job well is, because lots of people work all the time. I respect everybody that works all the time. And I chose this, but I get up at 4:30 in the morning and I start working, and then I take from 7 to 10 to be with my family in the evening, and I usually work from 10 to midnight, and then I go to sleep for like 4.5 hours, and I do it all again the next day, because my job is to teach the next generation how to do what I do and to instill in them passion. And when you take away the resources, and now I have to go get those resources and fight bureaucracy all the time, at some point you just reach a tipping point where burnout is a real thing. And so I think focusing on how to eliminate the burnout and bring back joy should be what people are that are responsible for figuring out how higher ed works. I feel like that's what they should. That's what we should be focusing on.
And it seems like a tall task, but I don't think so. I think that it's
totally doable.
It's basically just like creating more freedom.
Yeah.
I wrote a paper last week, and I used your example and it was like well received of when you wrote for a grant. I think it was like $25,000 or something like that, and the state wouldn't let you collect the money.
Yes, that's yeah.
I mean that's it.
That's the bureaucracy, though.
Right.
And bureaucracy has its place, and it absolutely is there for oversight, and we need to have oversight. But when the oversight is crippling and it shuts the system down and is nothing but a series of never-ending bottlenecks, like, how are we supposed to do what we do? How am I supposed to have the time to prepare my lectures, to advise the students, to seek the funding, to write the papers to stay relevant, if I also have to literally fight to get the grant to go? You know what I'm saying? So, but at the same time, I chose this life, and if I have to fight to get the grant to go, I'm going to fight. I'm not going to just roll over on it. But it's taking time away from the students, and that's what we should be here for all the time. And anybody that questions why we need higher education, we're about to send another rocket out and put people on the moon again, and the people that did that they went to school. Like, we need school. It's an important aspect. But
the vaccine.
Yes, the vaccine that enabled us all to do this. That was a bunch of people I graduated with from here worked on that vaccine. Hell, Dr. Rizempo worked on that vaccine, and if we don't have biology departments that are funded and have the ability to buy a pipette tip, we can't use the pipette to figure out how to make a vaccine or train the people that will help us when, God forbid, the next pandemic shows up. So we are 100% necessary. I think part of the reason why we were as successful as we are in science is there were absolutely, bureaucratic oversight here, but at the same time, as a general rule, West Liberty has been like science, biology, do your thing. And we follow the rules that were given to us, and now look where we are, because that bureaucratic oversight was reduced. So,
True. Okay. Now, last question.
sure.
So you mentioned the Virginia Tech. Mm-hmm. Their mascot's the Hokie.
Yeah.
No one knows what the heck the Hokie is, right?
Yes.
So we're a Hilltopper.
Uh-huh. I know where this is going.
Not really sure what a Hilltopper is. Now, there was a rumor that there was so we're the Hilltoppers with a bear mascot, black bear mascot. There was a rumor that there was a black bear on this winding road.
Yes.
Maybe a few years ago. But don't you think, what do you think about shifting to a crayfish as a mascot?
I have no problems with this. I mean, I can rattle off all the reasons why we should do it, but I'm on board.
Okay.
I've got our net's full of a bunch of grad students and undergrads that would totally be behind that.
It's no offense to,
and we have them
topper.
living on campus too.
Right, exactly. So. You have a real life mascot. We also have Sweet Pea too. Well, I really appreciate you coming today.
Thank you for having me.
And always enjoy speaking with you and learn so much. I hope our listeners feel the same way. Mm-hmm. I'm sure they do. We wish you good luck on all your endeavors. Again, if you want to support, you can't just don't call Zach and just want to hang out. He has no time. That's what we learned. But if you want to support things like the new Aquatic Center, give us a call, reach out. We'd love to talk with you or meet with you and explain how that all works. But again, to follow us, the Winding Road podcast here on Topper Station, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, and topperstation.com. We're aiming to have a weekly version of this podcast and learn about all the other people like Zach on campus. And we hope that you tune in next time. Thank you.
Thank you all.
A new and exciting career is waiting for you with the 16-month BA, BS to BSN nursing program at West Liberty University. Take part in innovative learning on campus, gain practice in the advanced simulation and skills labs, and experience virtual reality immersion software, and complete clinical work in local hospitals or healthcare agencies. Qualifying students may also be eligible for a $25,000 financial award to help with tuition and fees. Get started today at westliberty.edu/nursing.